What's up, NBA fan? What's up, all sports fans? This your boy JB, host of the Behind the Bench podcast networking channel. Just giving a shout out to the rest of the crew: Shad, Kelvin, Jermaine, KB Fin Room, Big Dog Talk Sports. That's right. That's right. For everyone who is tuning in, we thank you for supporting Behind the Bench and helping us making this show the best that it can be, as we now have earned the support of close to 2,300 subscribers. So, hey, we definitely appreciate it as we continue providing their sports content at the highest level possible by always shedding light on the history of the game and the history of sport. Now, I want to ask a question. And specifically when it comes to the NBA, as what I'm about to pose, we don't see take place in the National Football League. We don't see take place in Major League Baseball. And for hockey fans out there, we don't see this take place in the National Hockey League. It's only really pertaining to the NBA. And I ask myself, have sport debate shows, has it ruined media coverage pertaining to the National Basketball Association? You know, we'll start off with so-called good intentions. It can become detrimental down the road, especially if the platform that's being used is not being done so properly. And it's being done so with motive, agenda, trying to sway public opinion rather than just reporting the facts. And when that pendulum swings over to the point of no return, that's eventually where it travels to, the point of no return. And as I watch how debate shows have evolved, I believe it's taking a turn for the worse. And it has led to a situation where these prominent voices on these debate shows, instead of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, no pun intended, sticking to the script, reporting the news regarding sports as is, they have decided to exclusively appeal to the lowest common denominator. What I mean by that is an audience, in particular when they expound on past NBA or the history of the NBA or legendary figures of the NBA. At one time, those figures, those legends, those pioneers would be honored and respected and revered, right? And the history was upheld in high esteem. That's no longer the case. So when I say the lowest common denominator, they're trying to appeal to an audience who they can sway and convince that the past has no true regard and ultimately should be cast aside or looked at in a negative light without considering the contribution those past players have made to make the NBA what we know it today. The blood, the sweat, and the tear, the sacrifice, that those past players made. And as I like to say, to love the NBA or to have made a great contribution to this league, you don't have to be considered the greatest player ever to be respected. And that's the beauty of it. Because to focus on around the clock a situation where these debate shows are discussing or so focused on this GOAT talk, who's the greatest basketball player of all time in the NBA, it has literally crippled their ability to discuss the dynamics of the NBA today. It's crippled them. You don't hear any real objective view about the NBA. And the only reason they focus on the past is disingenuous. They only focus on the past to try to prove that today's game and today's player is that much better than yesterday. They use it as a starting point to show how knowledgeable, quote unquote, they are about the history of the NBA, but it's disingenuous in nature. And what's happening is their critique and this agenda and attempt to disregard the past is creating generational divide. It's creating a lot of resentment because you cannot sit there and disrespect the past eras of basketball that fans like myself had the opportunity to witness. And as I always say, I don't compare eras. It's senseless to do that. You can't sit there and say the 70s were no important because without the 70s, without the beginning of the NBA that started in the late 40s, you don't have the 50s. Then you don't have the 60s. Then you don't have the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and now. So their critique of the NBA would suggest that the NBA just started over the past 15 years, because this is when the attempt to begin the process of disparaging the past NBA greats started. And it's all rooted, in my honest opinion, in the attempt to diminish the greatness and the contribution of one Michael Jordan. That's the beginning of it. But ironically, when you try to do that, you create this malaise. And now they're stuck in their own commentary. Thus, these debate shows in regards to the NBA have ruined media coverage of the sport. They've ruined it. They've ruined it because they take the past, they research the stats, they become revisionist and start the process of trying to distort history. And see, what I don't like about it, the voices, the people that are trying to do this, they didn't play basketball, especially on the professional level. So what right would they have to sit there and try to disparage the contribution of past greats? What right? And what's sad about it is you have so many young people tuning into these shows that are literally being indoctrinated with these misnomers and falsehoods and distortions. And they're taking it as gospel and they run with it without knowing they're being led astray. That's not what happened when we came up. That's not what happened as I started watching professional basketball over 40 years ago. That's not what happened. And matter of fact, the voices who had direct access to have an opportunity to cover the NBA or people who played in the NBA, prominent figures, or coached in the NBA, or served some capacity within the league. Therefore, when those voices are called on, they're going to uphold history and literally expound on what the standard is. And that's what made the NBA so great then. It's like you had great play, you had great competition, and you had great commentary. And it generated this mystique. See, they didn't have to change nothing. And because of how the history of the league is being distorted, it's created a counter effect that those voices attempted to do so have not anticipated. And that there has been an ongoing disinterest of the NBA during the regular season. Thus, they have to come up with these ideas to stoke interest. Thus, the inaugural in-season tournament and this ongoing play-in tournament. But ironically, especially in regards to the in-season tournament, is created the counter effect in that it has generated even more disinterest and actually devalues the regular season of the NBA. See, that's not possible in the NFL. You can't devalue the regular season in the NFL. And you really can't do so in Major League Baseball. Baseball preserves its history. They uphold the history. And it's like this great aura when they speak of the great players of yesterday: Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Roberto Clemente, Reggie Jackson. We can go on and on. Bob Gibson, Sandy Koufax. They uphold those figures, man. And it's really special. And it's something to be admired. It's something to be admired. Roy Campanella. It's like a mystique. And they pretty much do the same thing for the most part in the NFL. You don't hear a commentary about, well, today's running back is better than yesterday's running back. Because for all practical purposes, even though he's no longer the all-time NFL leading rusher, Jim Brown, in many ways, is still considered the standard for all running backs. Where if you surpass his career rushing total of 12,312 yards, well, that is the benchmark to say that running back is a Hall of Famer. Then, of course, the late great Walter Payton, who they named the Citizenship Award after. It's special, man. It's special. They don't do that in the NBA no more. They used to. But I believe a lot of this malaise and an attempt to disparage the past is rooted in trying to literally erase Michael Jordan from memory. And this ongoing effort is really, it originated around 10 years ago and has exacerbated and created a very toxic environment. And it's a turnoff if you truly have grown up during the years where the history of the sport and the NBA was upheld to the highest degree. And I'm going to tell you something else. Because of the disparaging media coverage of NBA history, it's even devalued the criteria to qualify for Hall of Fame status. Because of that, ironically, it's produced a counter effect because of this constant barrage of negative criticism of the NBA past. It has lowered the bar to determine greatness today. They've ruined the coverage. They've ruined it. See, one thing you can't do, you cannot trash the past in anything because the past is there to learn from. The past is there, especially when it comes to achieving success and greatness, the past is therefore a source of inspiration. When you trash the past, what is there to aspire to? That's why there's this perception that today's player is not as competitive and doesn't give the impression that they truly want to be great. It's because they have no reference to compare to because of the attempt to eradicate the importance of the past. You see, it's all tied together. The past is a continuum from the past to the present to the future. If you try to cut off the past, well, the present becomes disrupted in a lot of ways, and the future of what you want to continue watching is in jeopardy of faltering and collapsing. And that's where the NBA finds itself because of the negative coverage of this league. It has led to a situation where we have experienced the lowest viewership of the NBA during a regular season in the history of network and cable TV. That happened this season. Because of the constant barrage of negative criticism of NBA's past. And when you do that, there's nothing to aspire to. And as a result, the bar gets lowered. While you're trying to prove that today's player is that much greater than yesterday, and what happens is it generates a degree of entitlement. You see what I'm saying? So what do a lot of people say about today's players? They carry on this air of entitlement, like they supposed to have this viewership, or fans should want to tune in and watch us no matter what, even if we sit out X amount of games, even if we exercise, load management. And this is where Michael Jordan said, you can't fool the consumer. You can't cheat the game. And this is why eventually, in a lot of ways, in general, when it comes to society, we need to return back to basics. There's too many agendas out here, and it's creating confusion, chaos. And as one of my friends said, confusion and chaos eventually leads to destruction. Look at what's happening to the NBA. Here's a perfect example of a direct reflection that directly highlighted the perilous state of the NBA, the precarious state of the NBA, I should say. I correct myself. It all reflected and reared its ugly head during this year's All-Star game. So much so, you heard fans say, or even the commissioner say, maybe we need to do away with the All-Star game and just utilize All-Star weekend as a quote unquote celebration of the players. Who wants to tune in just so we can witness a celebration? The game is supposed to be the celebration. But see, I believe the negative barrage of NBA's past has created lethargy of today's players when they participate in that event. Because subconsciously, there's no standard to live up to, because you're trying to eradicate the importance of the past contributions of those players from yesteryear. See, it's real, and it's directly attributed to the sport debate shows of today. It is a major turnoff. They don't realize what they're doing. In the process, they are lowering the bar of their own field. Because I'm going to tell you, sports commentary yesterday compared to today is like two worlds apart. They maintained the bar. Matter of fact, they elevated the standard back then. Think about it. When ESPN first started, you knew when they started that network, the goal was to become what is known as the leader in sports television. So they knew that they had to elevate the standard each and every year till they achieved that goal. They couldn't cut no corners, and they had to be as objective and accurate as possible when it came to covering sports. It was a joy to tune in and watch ESPN and then other networks that followed, that attempted to maintain that standard. That's not the case no more. They're not trying to maintain the standard because their critique is not based on any type of journalistic integrity. And they're interjecting their own feelings and opinions. And what happens is when they falsely cultivate their platform, what's happening is they are setting aside journalism, and it sparks a degree of creating an agenda. And the greater their platform, they discovered that they have more power and influence. And then as a result, they began to try to dictate the landscape of the NBA. As if they played in the NBA, or as if their opinion is greater than the participants and those who competed in the league themselves. So therefore, they have concluded that they're bigger than the game. And when you do that, you begin to ruin media coverage. Now, at some point, going down this road, it will crash on them. And I believe a lot of these voices will eventually, they'll run its course and they will fall off. They will fall off, and then they will lose the support over time as people who tune into them going to start to realize that they're being misled. And then when that happens, it's going to be a call to return back to basics. I believe that's what's going to happen. Because at some point, enough is enough. They sit here and talk about a basketball player who retired for good in 2003 in Michael Jordan. This is 2024, and they constantly sit there and talk about why Michael Jordan lost to the Boston Celtics in 1986, which was coming up soon on 40 years ago. Think about that. He retired in 2003. He hasn't set court in 20 years, but they talk about him as if he's still playing. But that also shows how great he is. And it also shows that he is still the standard, even when they try to erase him from memory. So ultimately, they're only fooling themselves and doing their audience a major disservice. That's right. But as they say, eventually, the cream will rise back to the top in due time. And we will be privy to watching genuine sports personalities who will be solely focused on reestablishing the standard and raising the bar back to what it needs to be. and simply cover sports the way it was meant to be. So I just want to drop that nugget. I can't wait for that time to come. I'm eagerly waiting. But until next time, this is JB for BTB, Behind the Bench.